I'm gonna shift the conversation a little bit here. And I'm going to really sort of pick up on a little bit around what Jonathan had said. And Jonathan, when you shared around legacy building and we were talking about collective impact, Shabna, one of the things that I reflect upon as a leader, and it's been something that when I first entered into the sector, wasn't as prominent for me. I was in the early part of the career, like Jonathan. I hadn't always stepped into this space. I always have been in this space in terms of volunteering. I started volunteering the nonprofit sector when I was only 14, and it's been a passion since then. But when it became a career for me, I experienced what probably all of you have experienced, which is expect to be putting in a lot more hours as you think. Expect to be immersed in so many different fields that you had not had imagined that you would be sort of touching on. There's the work in the nature of itself it's almost 360. There's always several perspectives to consider. It's never one dimensional. My question to the panel is, and it's come up in sort of in different ways inside the chat as well too, is, there's special people that sort of do work that make a career into going into the work of social impact. But let's be frank here, the work also is risky. When I say risky, we've navigated through especially difficult times. All of us since 2020, there has been, and nobody that has been unfazed by really feeling depleted. There's every aspect of our life as we've known it, our intersections, the way we view things, world life things, the way we interact with communities, everything has changed. During this time of extreme change, the social impact sector has been asked to do more. In fact, nowhere in time, at least in the nearly 15-year career I've had here at DIVERSEcity, has there ever been a time where there's been a bit of a pause. I know folks have always looked for it, but we are in the work of constantly responding into communities. My question to you is, especially in a sector that is overwhelmingly represented by women, and I specifically note women because during the last 2 to 3 years, that was the overwhelming number of demographic that opted out of the labor force. And in a sector that is known for precarious work, so short-term work for a lot of us that actually have multiple short-term contracts and not sustainable funding. How do we make this a viable and desirable field for future generations to step into to build meaningful careers when during times of depletion, we need to also take a look inward and ensure our cups are also being filled while we're filling the cups of others. So it's been something that's been really resonating for me around how do we create the work of social impact to become more sustainable in the future. So again, I'm opening the floor here around your perspectives of what else other than that intrinsic, I don't want to say other than that, I'm not minimizing the intrinsic reasons of why one would join this work. What are obligations and responsibilities as organizations we need to look at in order to make the work, in order to make these meaningful careers also sustainable, also at less risk of burnout, more conducive for marginalized groups to be taking part in? Basically, how do we have our cake and eat it too?
Yeah. Neelam, I'm happy to jump in. Such a great question, right? And I think your question has so many layers to it. And so I'm going to try and be very brief, but probably touch on a few points. So I'm speaking not in my official, capacity at the university. I'm speaking as someone who's a social worker at heart and who's trained in the field. It is my humble opinion that while in the last 30 years, professionals, education sector, and employers to some extent have all tried really hard to emphasize how important the social services sector is for survival of humanity and to keep society together. I'm of the opinion that we've done such a poor job of making our business case. And what I mean by this is that today in my community, I live in Burnaby. Today in my community, let's just say that there is a gaping hole on a road where hundreds of cars go by. This would be treated as a safety emergency, and that gaping hole will be fixed so that people don't fall into it. Same with a bridge, right? We see the kind of quick responses and the immense amount of money that gets put in when there is actually an infrastructure or there is a natural disaster kind of a problem. In the social service sector, we are dealing with human beings whose bridges within themselves are falling apart, whose minds have gaping holes because of the trauma or the abuse or whatever it is that they have faced in life, and they've not yet healed completely from it. But throughout history, if you look at it, right, there has been always a differential treatment in where societies, governments in power choose to put their money and their time. So there's a number of people who are responsible for this. It's not all the fault of, say, government or the education system or the nonprofit sector. We're all kind of, contributors to this problem, because those of us who work in the sector, don't often have the confidence to speak about the importance of our work and the impact of our work. And we lack that confidence because when we do schooling, we are not taught to quantify the impact of our work. We're not taught to articulate what objectives and outcomes we are after, and when they have been met, to make somewhat of a cost benefit or a cause effect kind of an analysis. So what this has led to is, unlike the nursing sector, for instance, which is also a helping profession, but nobody's questioning the importance of nurses. No one's questioning what wages we should start them off at. But we continue to underpay and overwork people in the social services sector, right? So I just feel that the time has come where the education system across the world for social services courses, whether it's a frontline worker or whether it's a senior management, we need to teach the future generations to speak about their work the way an architect would speak about the building they're going to build and the resources they need. And if you don't want marble and you want concrete, yes, the cost will go down. So if you won't give me 45 minutes to sit with a client who's attempting or who's contemplating suicide, and you're going to only pay me 30 minutes to speak to that person, you're then putting that person in a place where they only have two choices: drop the ball with that person who's suicidal and walk away in 30 minutes, or overwork yourself and work for free for another 30 minutes. So I think as people in this field and funders, clients, educators, we all need to come together. And I think 2023 is a great year to do that, to do a business case of how important the social impact sector is. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll feed off Sabana's great reflection right there. I've really wrestled with these questions, and yet felt somewhat inadequate, given that I've only recently approached this work, in a focused sort of fashion. But the thoughts that stand out are as follows. I think we need to tell our story more, and we need to tell it better. Messaging is key. I think, and just to feed off that, we need to eliminate any ambiguity around the value proposition that we're bringing to the table. However we do that, that's something that we can determine going forward. Next is, I think we need to coalesce our messaging around values. There's a temptation, I realize, to build an institution which will be, in a sense, a monolith unto ourselves here at Umoja, we keep saying. But really what we should be seeking to do is build a movement, as opposed to just because that's a self-serving notion to think about organizations, because they give us a sort of skewed sense of pride as opposed to a positive pride, because something meaningful and long-lasting is being accomplished. Next is, I think we need to collaborate more as in the sector, because that will help amplify our message for sure. And we need to be outcomes focused. That's true. Just like any, if you like, institution within society, if I could, collectively call us that. And then we need to empower those who work in the sector. We're a small organization, and my aspiration is to make Umoja a safe place for people to work, but also they can be proud of being in this, associated or linked to the organization, because then they become our messengers out there. So that's just some kind of high-level reflection from me with respect to your great question there, Neelam.
Thanks, Jonathan, and I truly appreciate this. And please know your perspectives, especially as one that's maybe hasn't had a long tenure inside the social impact sector, is especially important, because I think we normalize things when there is very little change. You're the set of fresh eyes that are actually validating what we're actually feeling and experiencing. So thank you for sharing that.
I just want to echo what Swapna and Jonathan mentioned. To me, as leaders, there are so many things that we need to do to protect our team members. We need to provide more support to staff. We could be training for them to deal with situation more effectively, to protect themselves from those, mental challenging moments, right? And then we need to celebrate small successes with them, make them understand that we appreciate their time, their efforts, and then we thank them for their wonderful work to help the clients. And then we have to be advocate for our team members to get more resources for them, to create a better and more effective system. So staff won't have to work, so many extra hours. They don't get burned out. And then we have to honor self-care. Time off is time off. When staff is away, we not to bother them. We don't expect that they would, put extra hours here. Right. So being leaders, there's so many things we need to do to protect our team members.
Thank you, Trang. Really well said. And I'll put this out there, of course, for leaders as well, too, because there's many of us here as well, too. As leaders, we also need to look out for one another and one ourselves. It's one of the most loneliest jobs, I can tell you. And so I think it's really, when we're talking about collective impact, is to really make sure that we're ensuring that we're making these changes at a system level where it affects everyone, and how can we continue to do that without having that gnawing feeling that somehow you're compromising the mandate and mission of your organization. But as Jonathan has also really so eloquently articulated, attaching yourself to a larger movement and a larger ideology as opposed to the concept of organization, I think is a real sort of a mind shift that I think many leaders are going to be forced to face over this next while, especially as we take a look at a very, very changed labor force, a very changing demographics. Of course, we've got the largest swath of demographics, the baby boomers, all coming up into the age of perhaps exiting out of the labor market. And we've got new generations. We've got our Gen Xers, we've got Gen Ys, millennials, everybody that'll comprise a labor force that is demanding to look different.
Neelam, I just want to make a point, just a cue from what you said about the responsibility of the leaders in the community. And I'm really glad, Jonathan, Shobna, Tarang, thank you for sharing all those points about, capturing our stories with impact and the advocacy, articulating the work that we do. Something that we are noticing is compassion fatigue right now. Neelam mentioned in the beginning, with COVID-19, we saw our frontline workers working with demonstrating superhero strength and resilience. But we all know that's not sustainable. So when we are spending so much of our capacity serving, the empathy quotient is running low, the compassion fatigue sets in because you are coping with crisis. You are living the crisis with them, their housing crisis, their frustration with employment, their, triggers of their trauma. You are living that with them. So I think it's a very, very important piece in this, whole picture of our responsibility and accountability to the society, that leaders in the sector must prioritize, self-care and, well-being, mental well-being for the people who are serving in the community, so that they don't burn out, their resilience is not running low, and we are not running out of the fuel. We are constantly refilling our cup, as Neelam earlier said.